It's time again for Type 40 Live's early edition, the live stream Doctor Who magazine show, again on Rumble, X, YouTube, and on Facebook too. It's where we talk all things Doctor Who, everything out there in the Whoniverse, through thick and through thin, from way back then to the right here, right now, us and you, of course, in the live chat there, full of fellow friends, fans, and companions. Talking about companions, you can't keep a good Doctor Who legend down forever, can you? Although they did try. Where will all of this fit in the streaming landscape when viewing time is at a premium and we've all got an absence of our favourite show? Plus, has a brand new strange companion been added to the ranks covertly? Find out more here with us on Type 40 Live. And I thought we'd start the week here with a bit of neon green and gold to sort of liven things up a little bit, because it's gone a little sleepy, hasn't it, out there in the Whoverse, in the Whoniverse. And I think we're all playing the waiting game, aren't we? But that's what Doctor Who fans sort of do best. Well, one of the things we do best after grousing, isn't it? Hello. I'm Dan Hartley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks. Welcome back to the show, start of another weekie in Geek. And even if it's gone quiet for the time being, that can all change, can't it? In the click of the fingers, or a double pulse, it seems, with Doctor Who. So whilst we wait and watch some pretty still waters, but there's still other things to talk about, things to ask you to, so you can get involved there in the live chat on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X, with everything we've got to lay before you at this time. Okay, I've got a panel to bring on to. A trim panel here who are raring to go, even though it's got slightly colder. I think most of us are in double layers to one degree or another. We'll do a stock take in a little while. Get involved in the comments as always, and we'll catch up in due course. Okay, I've always liked this view here from the underside of the console room. It's so unusual, to tell you the truth, and I've always wondered about sort of where those little enclaves go to and those bubbles. It reminds me of being stuck inside something from the Wallace and Gromit movie. Anthony, are you a Wallace and Gromit fan?
Hello, Dan. Good evening, everybody. No, I'm not a Wallace and Gromit fan. I'm probably the only person in the country, aren't I? Oh my goodness, looking at this picture of this TARDIS console room, Dan, it's perfectly chosen because it reminds me of autumn. And look, all those autumnal colours. It feels like, the summer's gone and autumn is on its way. Look at that orange. Very striking, isn't it?
I think so. It's got this sort of warmth about it, despite the cold, bright green that would be sort of, you'd find more in a nightclub, I suppose, or one of the really flashy bingo halls. Do they still have bingo halls, or is it all gone online? That's, I think, what we need to know. Have you been this weekend? You had a good one?
I've had a really good week, actually. I can't believe how quickly these Mondays come around. I'm sure we were only here just days ago, just doing and talking Type 40. But here we are again. I'm raring to go. I have my mug of tea in my Sports Direct mug. I've just topped it up with hot water. I'm good to go. The poster, Dan, is still the same for Rear Window. I think we've got another... as well. We've got another week of that. And then the October poster will emerge. But I do have my pumpkin ready to go for Halloween.
That is early, but the witching hour can't come fast enough for you. Is that how it works?
Well, do you know what, Dan? The evenings are getting darker, aren't they? And the nights are coming in quicker. And I just thought a couple of fairy lights, Halloween lights. Let's get it out there because they're only around for a couple of weeks, and then they have to go. And
it sort of matches the golden walls here of Matt Smith's TARDIS, with all the crank handles and the various bits and pieces. And the gramophone, horn, everything. I love this stuff. The gramophone trumpet, I think they call it. I can't quite remember. But I love all the split level stuff. Love all the split level stuff anyway. We operate on several levels here on this show, of course. Of course we do. We would like to think we've got something for everybody. Question is, how long will it take the sports fans here to be satisfied when David Milling steps into bat again?
Hello, everybody. Hello. Yes, hello, Dan. Hello. Hello, Guy. How are you? Sorry, Anthony. Sorry, Anthony. So, hello, everybody. Yes, that green looks reminiscent of my claggy pipes I was coughing up last week. But But yes, it looks also a bit similar to the sort of like fluorescent night nurse one used to have for cold relief at night time. But yes, I spent most of my weekend or yesterday watching covers on the pitch at Trent Bridge, sitting in the members' pavilion, drinking tea, and I had a very nice scone or scone, dependent on how you prefer it, with jam and cream. And I'm pleased to report that the jam had gone on first.
I'm common, so I say scone.
I say scone as well, but that scone is not common. Scone is common. But there's going to be, yeah, I think so. That's what I tell my wife anyway, who says scone. But yeah, so it's lovely, and I love that TARDIS. I love the fact that it's got the underneath where you can see where they used to tinker with the mechanics of it, and it just has got so much going on. Unlike the white monstrosity that we were left with. You could
all
say.
the fun of the fair is that what I always think of when I see this, almost like a fairground. It just needs the ding bell where you swing the hammer down and it travels all the way up and hits the strongman sort of competition game. That's the kind of thing I think is missing with this. Yeah,
and the mood lighting as well. The mood lighting.
Yeah. And it's also a favourite of our final panelist, of course. Big Matt Smith fan, Charlotte Shields.
I've not hidden that at all, really, have I?
No, not very well.
No,
hi, Charlotte.
It's one of the reasons, like, I love The Doctor's Wife for lots of reasons. But one of them is, like you said, it's so bright, Matt's TARDIS, and it's got all those oranges. But in that episode, it all went dark, and the green really, I felt like they put even more green in the lighting in that episode, just to sort of give you that feeling of the TARDIS being sort of dying and it being in that sort of really dangerous situation.
Yeah.
So, and I think certain shots, it just made Matt look even more sort of scary with his Doctor at points. So that's one of the things I adore about Doctor's Wife is how they use the TARDIS. They go, right, let's play, let's change the look of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite the fact that a lot of us sort of love the classic show for what it was, Anthony, the brightly lit sort of put the console where we can, depending on what else is filming. It always felt in some respects like those scenes were an afterthought, both literally in the script and when they were allocating their resources, didn't it, at BBC Television Centre?
And it was always, as you all know on this show, I'm a big Tom Baker fan, and when I started watching Doctor Who, you didn't see this, in season 12, you didn't see the inside of the TARDIS, and that was always a big draw for a Doctor Who fan, for me anyway. You saw the blue box outside, but you never saw inside. To think about Planet of Evil, so any opportunity to go inside the TARDIS was a great opportunity. And then once you got used to that brightly lit, I don't know if you can remember, Dan, that brightly lit console room, by season 14, it's all changed again, and there's this dark, mahogany,
I love that one.
Oak wood TARDIS interior, which was one of my favourites.
That's my favourite too, Anthony. It is my favourite, just because it's just brilliant.
Well, it promotes a different kind of feeling, and I think this is why we look at so much of the iconography, because each time we look at something like that, a picture of a console room or a version of the signature tune or something like that, it conjures up something else. Dependent on when in our lives or even what time of year the episodes were broadcasted, it can sort of take us back there just for 10, 15, 20 seconds and take us to that sort of special Doctor Who place, whether that particular era was our era, Charlotte, or whether it's just something that we hear about all the time. Could be an era that we didn't like particularly, but it sort of engages our Doctor Who engine, and that's that's what I like to think.
I think with lots of fans, you have emotions in certain scenes or moments, but I think with Doctor Who, like you said, we're really attached to the TARDIS looking like a police box and how that has to stay like that, or certain other bits of, just like I said, iconography. I think it's something that's sort of not spoken about a lot, but it's really important. And like, as soon as they mess with it, you can't describe it. It's almost like your heart skips a beat. You go, no, you can't do that. And it's sort of this real sort of thing of you. physical body reaction almost. I get that sometimes with other stuff,
Last week,
especially with Doctor Who.
Well, last week when we talked about the Doctors, the unofficial BBV documentary, now, Anthony, you brought up a couple of times the official one, More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, and everything that was put together, how creative that was. But I remember one of the big USPs of that was that we were going to see somebody go through the double doors for the first time and into the TARDIS, that immersive sort of single shot move progression from one domain into another, which had never been done before. And now look how we take all of that for granted.
Yeah, I think that was on Kevin Davies' bucket list, wasn't it, to do what the original television series had never done. I mean, there's a glimmers of it, isn't there, in some of the black and whites, like the Daleks when Susan goes out into the forest for the first time. But there's glimmers of it, but never from the other way in. And I think that's definitely on. That particular documentary, you raise it, Dan, it's great for those little reconstructions of, recreating familiar moments. And what Charlotte was saying there about, iconography, some real, iconic moments in Doctor Who and the Dalek films were being recreated for that documentary. It was, it was really good. Yeah, great. Great to reminisce about that last week.
So there's so much of modern Doctor Who fandom, which now, even I take for granted. And we talk about the action figures quite regularly and how it's impossible to get hold of them, and those special TARDIS models too for each Doctor. And I think it's wonderful that they exist, particularly when they've got those like backdrops inside the TARDIS shells as well. All those nice little loving touches, rather than just a molded piece of plastic, whack it on the shelf, charge as much as we can and get. There is still a little TLC there and an awareness of how much this iconography means to people and how it's still a unique selling point of Doctor Who. I mean, up in Madame Two Swords, for example, up in Blackpool, the present exhibit is still Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor and the TARDIS with the London backdrop, and you can see through to the TARDIS there as well, which is ideal for selfies. It's not going to convince anybody when you walk up directly to it, but ideal territory for a selfie. Of course, waxworks of Doctor Who's are no new thing, are they? I think the first one that I'm conscious of is the Tom Baker one, Anthony, from 1980, where Tom was the first actor to ever have two waxworks of himself at Madame Two Swords, wasn't it? Do you remember that?
Yeah, very probably. And it's really interesting, isn't it? I was reading a comment on social media this week about, how new fans look back at the classic series and say, what was anybody thinking using a waxwork of Tom Baker for that photo call of the 5 Doctors? He said, well, what madness is this? At the time you kind of thought, oh, it's great that he's in the photo. Obviously, it's the Madame Two Swords waxwork, but that comment came up on social media this week, and I smiled to myself because, to anybody looking in now, 40 years later, it's bonkers, isn't it? I think you're probably right.
Part of it. Do you think part of it was the fact that most of those pictures were never really going to be seen in colour? They were going to go into black and white, into the newspapers of the day, because until 1986, when Eddie Shah launched the newspaper Today, all newspapers were black and white from cover to cover, weren't they?
Yeah, and you're right. It's better in black and white. It's better in black and white.
It's most convincing if you squint.
Yes, good. He was almost there in spirit, right?
And if you think about it, like now, if a picture goes out, whether it's a publicity photo or an actor puts it out, it's on like everybody's phone and everybody's tablet within hours. And it's like detailed in, and you can zoom in. Like back then, if a photo went out, it would pretty much only be certain press outlets that would publish it, so they could control it a lot more, and people would only have, like you say, they'd have to get a paper to see that. So they probably thought, this is gonna fool people.
Obviously, I don't know what became of Tom Baker's waxwork, either of them in the end. Somebody's probably got them in their collection, somebody like Andrew Beach, one of these major, huge fans with massive space. David Howe's probably got one in his museum or something like that. But what of the past Doctors? Because it was only a couple of years ago where Jodie Whittaker's sort of Doctor, she was there in place at Blackpool. You think, well, why and where has her waxwork gone in just a few short years? Well, thanks to one of our on-the-spot reporters for Type 40, who has been there in person at Blackpool at Madame Two Swords in the last few days, we have found out, everyone. So it turns out if you've been looking for the Jodie waxwork, you will still find her, but she's been demoted and reclothed here. So she is now to be found in the VIP cloakroom area at Madame Two Swords in Blackpool with her god-awful outfit stripped from her, and instead they've put her in this sort of teal suit there, minding the coats for everybody who goes to Madame Two Swords. So it could be anybody.
It's very ill-fitting. Can I just say it's
whose suit do you think it was? Whose suit do you think it was before that? There, Eddie Large's maybe.
Lionel Blair's. I don't know. Bob Monkhouse. It could have been anybody's really. Or Bernard Manning's, perhaps, as it's in the northwest. Because it seems to be a lot larger than what Jodie is, and that's appalling grammar. So I apologise.
Well, it could be worse. It could be worse, Anthony. They could have melted her down, couldn't they?
I was just about. But there's sort of like, I like that Hartnell kind of flick of the bottom of her hair. So maybe somebody had an idea there somewhere along the line. I don't know. I nearly said melted her, but yeah.
That could be some aggressive combing, Anthony, I think, that's been
aggressive combing.
Yeah.
Administered. Who knows? Who knows? So, yeah, if you are a fan of Jodie, or you just fancy having your photograph taken with just Jodie Whittaker, sort of, looks a bit like her. At any rate, you can find her now in the cloakroom there at Madame Two Swords up in Blackpool. That's go and sort it out. Yeah, so we are at the forefront here of everything that's new and happening in Doctor Who. Of course, we are at Type 40 Live. That's very much what we do here, and you can join in the live chat as well. This is another bit of iconography we don't see enough of, the 2010 Doctor Who logo there, which now looks so old, 15 whole years ago, and the lesser seen 2-tier version. This is the Keir Starmer version, the 2-tier version, which I don't know if they've actually used this on any merchandise, but I was always really fond of it partly, Anthony, because it did remind me of, fun enough, of the Hartnell era, you know?
Yeah, and actually the purples and the blue, it kind of lend itself to thinking about, I don't know, in my head, thinking about those early black and white stories. Yeah, there is. I do like that, the Doctor and the Who kind of above it. And I think the TARDIS shaped D&W is quite clever. But yeah, when you said about merchandise and whether that appeared on any, I can't actually think that I saw that on anything. Somebody's bound to correct me in the chat, and they should do, because I'm way out of my depth here. But I don't know if it did. I don't know if it did appear on anything. Did it?
I can remember some of the books it did.
I might have a pen. I might have a pen in a drawer that has that logo on. So in a moment, I might go running over to the pen box.
Let us know. There'll be people who won't be able to sleep at night until they know.
I might turn the camera off in a moment, and I'm going to have a little rustle and bring it over here and just rustle.
No, I can't remember in some of the BBC books, because it's quite awkward to put Doctor Who on the spine. So it was quite useful to just have the TARDIS shape, the DW, on that clearly that were Matt's Doctor's books, like the BBC ones, not the Target, the range that was made from the BBC themselves, and that was on all the spines, because I've got a few of them.
Very nice. Very, very fond of this while we're talking of iconography. And yes, current day Doctor Who, the current day logo, of course, the diamond one, I do feel has been a little sort of smeared for the time being, somewhat tainted by recent happenings, and some of our dearest figures too, come to think of it, particularly classic monsters. With the benefit of hindsight, though, fans of the original companion, Susan Foreman, as played by Carol Ann Ford, I think things could have gone a lot worse. You know, we were disappointed, of course we were, that we were shortchanged on what looked like a full-bodied, full-blown return to the screen as part of this year's season of Doctor Who that never actually seemed to happen by a few whispers, didn't it? Into a misty screen there in one episode. So we know that there's something else that's going on there. And maybe it'll come to something in the future, but maybe it won't. But I do think in some ways we could be better off that the fabulous Carol Ann Ford's character wasn't dragged in to such an absolute and total mess. There she's looking very dignified and radiant as ever, the original Doctor Who companion. Now, words got out this week that despite the fact that her part was diminished there in season 2 of Doctor Who, she's got a new part in a new indie horror movie. Now, this is Carol Ann Ford's first film in a number of years, but yeah, she's been revealed as one of the cast members of Harbinger here. Now, it's a small independent film, as these things often are, but in this movie, she's going to play Sue, who is the mother of the central character, and who's the only surviving victim of a serial killing devil worshipper, who's going to be played by Peter Woodward, the veteran character actor, son of the late Edward Woodward. So I love a British horror movie, providing they've got that kind of slightly Wicker Man sort of vibe to it. I think Carol Ann Ford still has that sort of alien quality that she always had, where she doesn't feel like she quite belongs. She's great at channeling that side to characters. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely down for this. Have you heard about this, Anthony? A brand new part for Carol Ann Ford after all?
No, I was listening like all the other listeners to the show tonight. I had no idea that she'd been asked to be in this production. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but has she, since coming back to her cameo in Doctor Who, has she not acted for a long time? I know she's done a couple of quite a few Big Finish. But then she went, after she left Doctor Who and left acting and came back for the Five Doctors, and was she an acting coach or a drama teacher or a voice coach? So I'm not sure that she's acted in a long while. So this is absolutely fantastic that hasn't, however big or small the part is to be in a film production. I'm with you on small scale British films though, British horror films. I don't know if you've seen them. Probably Charlotte's probably seen it. Is the film The Last Night in Soho with Matt Smith?
Yes, he did that last year or a couple of years before.
Yeah, have you seen it, Charlotte?
No, but Matt has done a few sort of like indie horror things. He did that and another.
He was in Starve Acre about 18 months ago as well, which is a sort of bleached out again, a Hammer style film.
And the reason why I mention it is that that Diana Rigg, or Dame Diana Rigg, was in The Last Night in Soho playing this really mad axe killer. Who's revealed. I hope I'm not spoiling it for anybody. She's revealed as the villain of the piece, and then starts murdering everybody with this with long knives in this home in Soho. So I hope, maybe I wish that Carol Ann Ford gets a big part like Dame Diana Rigg in that movie, because
I was really pleased. I was really pleased to see this in all sincerity. Whether regardless of the status of the material she filmed for Doctor Who that we might not ever see. We've got a quote here from Carol Ann Ford, and she said, having not done a movie for quite a few years, I was looking forward to renewing my love for the experience of filmmaking, but never in my wildest dreams could I have anticipated such warmth and generosity from everyone. Yeah, she has been in films before, back in the 60s. She was in the 1962 adaptation of The Day of the Triffids, if you remember that one, David. I bet you've seen that in black and white. And I know you've seen this in the Great St. Trinian's train robbery from 1966, obviously after her time in Doctor Who. Loads of fun, those films, aren't they?
I've sadly never seen them, and I hang my head in shame. I've not even seen Ben-Hur or Lawrence of Arabia, so I am sadly, there are several titles lacking in my film back catalogue that I desperately do need to see. I'm more of a fan of Night of the Museum, but
when everybody mentions Ben-Hur, I always think it's like something Liverpudlian. It's in a Liverpudlian accent.
Yeah, I know, and it reminds me as to why Edward Woodward, who you previously mentioned, had so many D's in his name. I wasn't sure if you're aware. It's because otherwise he would have been called Iwa Wuwa. So that is another sort of dad joke that I must make. But it's delightful to see that Carol Ann Ford has been cast in this movie, because she has that, and if I may use such a descriptive term, she has that very ethereal sort of look about her that can cut you, well, put hairs on the back of your neck and make you go cold very quickly, because of that ability, that otherworldliness that she possesses, that can just snap you out of a sort of, oh, everything's okay, everything's going to be all right, and she can just turn it on a sixpence like that, and just give you the creeps by making herself very ethereal and otherworldly, and that's a wonderful skill to possess if you're trying to act, or if you are indeed acting, because you can change the whole mood immediately.
It's a gift to makers of smaller films, because they've simply got less technology to play with. They've probably got very minimal sets too, Anthony. Resources are just going to be quite, with the nicest possible way, they're going to be threadbare. They'll film probably wherever they can. So if the actors really have to sell material like this, don't they? And so to go to a veteran like Carol Ann Ford, obviously it's a sign of great respect, but great faith.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's Doctor Who fans involved in this production. I'm sure there probably are, to choose Carol Ann Ford to be in this part. But as we were talking about her and the pictures you were showing, Dan, I go back to her reappearance in Doctor Who, and when you said a moment ago, you said, oh, maybe that story will be finished or concluded, or maybe it won't. And my sadness is maybe it won't. Because how do you pick up that narrative, so many months, years potentially down the line, that, oh, do you remember when you saw the Doctor's granddaughter appear on the TARDIS scanner and call out to the Doctor? Do you remember that? Well, we're going to pick up that story. I feel as though you're probably right, and it's been lost, which is a great shame, because we waited beyond the 5 Doctors. We waited, classic fans waited a long time to see Carol Ann Ford's return to Doctor Who. So I think you're probably right. I think it has probably passed by, but it's great that she's in a film and we can enjoy her in something else, I think.
Wish her all the best with this. I think, given the fact the character's name is Sue, it can be taken as read that there are Doctor Who fans on crew, on staff at Harbinger. So we've got a quote here from Shogun Films founder Jonathan Softcott, who says one of the privilege of making our films is working with so many legendary older actors. Britain has a rich heritage of film and television, and it's wonderful that we can offer different roles to such iconic performers. Harbinger is released in early 2026. That's all we know so far. More news and a trailer as soon as one is available. Okay, let's see what people have got to say about the promise of this in the live chat and everything else we've talked about so far on this edition of the show.
The walls of time are breaking down. You need to listen. The only way to save the universe. Watch Type 40.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show, including Nicholas Horton here, ready to start another week with us at Type 40 Live with a hi, everyone. Fly Highland remarks on that. Matt Smith, TARDIS console room. Geez, the TARDIS looks like you have to walk a mile to reach it. I suppose it's to give them more, if they've got bits of dialogue, maybe, that there's more time for them to sort of move around the set to make it a bit more interesting for the viewer. I think that was probably part of the idea behind that, really, because even in the original David Tennant, Chris Eccleston one, they just got that ramp, hadn't they? Which once they were a few feet away, there's less possibilities. Well, I think it's quite inventive what they did with that. We have the Zero Room 2 in the live chat. Smith's era grabbed me from the opening shot of the pinwheel spinning outside Amy's house. Looked fab. I think, most people were grabbed instantly, weren't they? Grabbed instantly. Evening All says Woodhouse 122. We've got Garbage in the live chat too with the here we go. know. I'm not sure what he's doing. I don't think I want to know, but great to have you both with us as always. Adrian James is in this time as well, as is Tom from T-Dwarf Productions and Eastlyn Burkholder. Good to see lots of familiar names as ever, and some old friends circling back to us as well. Glad you've chosen the green, says Tom from T-Dwarf Productions. He does like the green. I think he'd probably...
I think we've known that for a while about Tom.
Oh, what else? What else is here? Yes, so somebody's asked a question about the documentary that was on Rewind TV last week. Yes, and we have seen it. We talked about it on the last early edition of the show just last week. So that's Stephen O'Neill. Did anyone watch the Doctor Who documentary shown on Rewind TV last Saturday? Yes, we talked about it at length last week. So go and check that out. Hail everyone, says Lord Thoth.
I love Thoth.
Hail right back.
Lord
Stephen
Thoth,
O'Neill,
known as God.
What was that? Sorry.
Lord Thoth, known as God, as he proclaimed himself to be last week.
Oh.
So.
A promotion.
Well, we've got a pope already on the panel, not tonight, but on Thursday sometimes.
Yeah, Gary Akers obviously is the pope, very much pope in waiting. Still, I would love BBC4 to start showing Doctor Who on Saturday night, says Stephen O'Neill. How many times have we had this comment? They have recently been showing All Creatures Great and Small and Miss Marple. Both had Peter Davison appearing in them. Doctor Who's on quite a lot, and neither of those shows are. So I think Doctor Who's got enough homes, really, enough places that people can find it, and the entire the bulk of it still being on the iPlayer, on the Whoniverse app. I don't think we can claim to be hard done by in 2025 for places to find classic Doctor Who, Anthony. To the extent that I could get rather jealous and bitter about it, you know.
Oh, Dan, you're talking to somebody that used to have a C60 cassette with a play and record in the 1970s, trying to audio record Doctor Who soundtracks from the episodes. Oh my goodness, and if anybody dared talk in the room,
yes.
The 5-year-old me would give them their wrath. So I think I was always addicted to Doctor Who. So the whole fact that every single episode is just a click in iPlayer is fantastic in one hand, but so annoying for the little 5-year-old me, because I would have loved to be able to do that. But it's great they're all on iPlayer. I'll tell you what though, Dan, I'm actually become lazy. The wonderful Blu-ray box sets, which are shiny and gleaming and wonderful and restored and amazing, I watch them all on iPlayer. I'm watching all the Peter Davison's episodes in order. I can't be asked to get out of the seat and get a new DVD to put it in. So I just press watch the next episode. So it's I love it.
It's amazing. It's great, isn't it, having it all there, Anthony? Because I for years until I wore it out, I remember I taped A Trial of a Time Lord episode 13 on C60 cassette, and half the way through it, my grandma was trying to get my younger sister, who had only been about 5, trying to be quiet because she was saying, "What's going on, Grandma?" And she was going, "Shh, shh, shh." And my grandma used to record sitcoms like Dad's Army as well that way, long before they got my grandma and granddad got a VHS recorder, and it was a really fantastic way to listen back to it. Despite the fact that some family members would cough or sneeze or fail to be quiet.
Sadly, it was the only way. I mean,
yeah.
I used to do it as well. Have you still got any of your tapes, Anthony?
I have. Yeah, I have.
Wow.
Can you believe? I was a real archivist even then. Yeah, I mean, Dan, you're talking to a boy that didn't take the Tom Baker doll out of the box, and when he did, he sort of played with it marginally and then put it back in the box. So
marginally.
Marginally. Why do you play with something marginally? I mean, that's fantastic.
Heretic has joined us in the live chat.
Play with stuff.
Heretic has joined us in the live chat too there on YouTube and insists that that Doctor Who logo was 100% used on some merchandise because he's got a T-shirt with it on. There you go.
Yeah,
We'll
well,
have to
I
have
looked
some
at
photographic
I
proof.
looked at my pens in the pencil case, and they do have that Doctor Who logo, but the Doctor is side by side Who. But they do have the DW next to each other, but the actual writing Doctor Who is actually side by side, not on the bunk bed thing, like the University Challenge thing. It's not that way. So it must have just been on the books and some other merch.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of somebody who's worked extensively in branding, when they put style guys together like that, when something does get revamped and relaunched, all of those things are packaged together and sent out to people who buy licenses to make merchandise. And they are given largely free rein about how and where they use whichever versions. And the market kind of decides, obviously dependent on the actual product, which version of the logo or logos will be readable, will be workable, depending on the carton, the box, the cover, or the spine of wherever it needs to go. And so often they'll assemble a line of, say, 4 or 5 variations, just simply to give people who have these licenses more options and let the cards fall where they will. And say 2 or 3 years down the line, they might refine that brand and scrap versions of it that people simply didn't pick up on, or things that needed sort of reworking in some way. That's definitely what happened with that version of Doctor Who. It's not untold at all. It's not an unknown by any stretch. Who else is here? Fly Highland. Yeah, Fly Highland's back. So's Dalek Lives Matter too. And Cheryl's in as well. A stormy night here. Hope you're all okay. It's a stormy night indeed, and there's even more to talk about. It's going to get far, far stormier. I am a gourd, insists Lord Thoth. I'm not going to argue with him, David. I'm just going to come up with this joke.
Not at all. He's too much power.
Hope that Lord Thoth does not smite us anytime soon. Thank you, everybody who's joined us so far in the live chat. We've got some great stories coming up for your input as well, to see whether any of these stories have made your radar. Let us know.
This is the Type 40 podcast. You will be exterminated.
Oh.
Yes, this, believe it or not, is the visage of Mr. Dominic Glynn, friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times, and we nearly kidnapped him, I think, when we were over Phil. Simon and I were going to take him for a couple of drinks, and he had to sort of get pulled away by one of the staff, dragging him back to one panel or another. Of course, big friend of Ian Diaz as well. He's done the music on, I think, 2 of Ian's films. And so big hello to Big Dom out there. So we always like to keep an eye on whatever Dominic Glynn's got coming up, not only because he is genuinely a friend of ours, but I've always loved his work. I mean, when he came aboard Doctor Who in 1986 to rework the theme tune for the Trial of a Time Lord season, it was just one of many shots in the arm that the show needed, I suppose, a fresh coat of paint as much as they could at a very crucial time, giving the show a brand new sound. And yeah, I think he did a lot of music for that season and the music for Dragonfire too. So a key figure. But in the years in between, Dom has had quite a career making music for other movies and TV shows, and places that you wouldn't necessarily expect either. There's a full interview with Dominic Glynn up on our home feed at type40.podbean.com. You'd be amazed at the places that his music has turned up. But as with a lot of key Doctor Who creatives, sooner or later, it does tend to come back to Doctor Who. And just this week, Dominic has revealed the cover here to his brand new album. It's now available, he says here in his release, in his blurb, and he says it's the soundtrack album to the film Indoctrinated. Now, I'd not heard of this film. And he says that the film tells the story of 3 Doctor Who fans whose careers and lives have been shaped through their love of their favourite TV show. He describes it as a heartwarming human interest story as much as it's about Doctor Who, and advises that you can check out one of the tracks through his social media, and you can download the whole album on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and many other digital stores as well. So I'm a big fan of Dominic Glynn's music over the years, Anthony. You know, I know whenever they change the music, some people tended to get a bit upset, but this is Doctor Who fandom. People always got upset. But I was all over it, and seeing this cover to Dominic's brand new album, it reminded me of Blacklight, the album that was put out by the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, which I think was about 88, 89, with the stuff from Tyler the Time Lord and Dragonfire on it. Did you pick this up?
I did indeed. I think that and the other cassette that the Doctor Who Appreciation Society released with music from the 10th Planet, I think is really quite collectible now. So if you've got that, and that
I have.
Yeah, I think it's quite collectible. But yeah. Can I just say, when you showed the picture of Trial of a Time and you started talking about Dominic Glynn, the theme tune for Trial of a Time Lord is unique, isn't it? It just does 1 year and that's it. That's all we get. But I think it's great. I think it's quite moody. I think it's quite doom laden. I think it has that kind of serious tone. And if you think about the first kind of 30 seconds of a Trial of a Time Lord, so you get the music and you get the model shot, it's an incredible opening for Doctor Who that's not been on for a while. And then we go back to perhaps it looking pretty much the same as it always had done. That's not a criticism because I quite like it, but that music is really good. And I have high, I really enjoy the music for Trial of a Time Lord. I think Dominic Glynn's
it's weird. It's weird, Anthony, because I can't imagine it on either season 22 or season 24, but that's probably because I've had 37 years to get used to it.
Yeah, it doesn't fit with 24, does it? I don't think.
No.
I think the content of 24 is, in many ways a little bit more lighthearted, a bit more upbeat. I also like those two. But yeah, different theme for a different time. But this music fits that first couple of minutes of Trial of a Time, I think, really well. Yeah, I think
a rock star, Dominic Glynn as well.
It's a splendid piece of how to open a Doctor Who series. The music, I agree with you about the theme tune, Anthony. It's more serious, and the opening to Trial of a Time Lord is probably some of the most dramatic yet melancholic sort of music that we'd probably seen since Logopolis, with that sort of, oh my God, there's something really doom laden about this. And I think that that music with the model shot, it still blows me away now, and it is just a perfect example of using music to really ram home the point that something bad is going to kick off here, and something bad is kicking off here, and I just think it is literally genius level music.
He is a genius. He's got a very distinctive style, and as I say, he is somewhat of a rock star. He's just got an enigmatic quality about him and his music, which definitely has still carried through to this day. He's very proud of his association with Doctor Who, despite everything else he's done. And I was just delighted to see that he was releasing this. There's a prospect of more sort of Doctor Who orientated Dominic Glynn music. To my shame, I never even heard of this film that it's for, Indoctrinated. It's coming soon. It's here listed as indoctrinated.com, where you can go and find out a little more. But these independent documentaries now, there's several of them that seem to be in production all at once, Charlotte, often revolving around the fan base. And sometimes when I watch these, sometimes when I watch them, they really, really work, and you feel like you get to know the people involved. Other times I actually feel a distance from them, and the stories kind of get lost. So I'm hoping that with the Dominic Glynn's music over the top as well, it just feels Doctor Who-y enough. I'm looking forward to trying to catch this.
Yeah, I didn't know this was a thing, so it's good to know, like you said, there's more sort of independent stuff happening. And I do think now, because we are blatantly in another hiatus, the show is clearly going to be off air for some amount of time. We don't know how long. We will see. That will breed, I think, a lot of fans either making their own Doctor Who stories, which have always been, I think, have been getting better and better throughout the years. The audios, the fan audios, and the productions. But the other side of that is this stuff where you said it's sort of fans being part of the story, fans telling stories about Doctor Who. So I think because we haven't got it on screen, we'll probably see, like I said, a lot more of these. And you're right, when it's got that, whether it's a writer who was on the show appears in it, or like with the music with Glynn, or you've got that little link to the actual show, I think it does sort of add a bit of specialness. And I think
because we don't need them to make us feel like we're watching actual Doctor Who, but I think it does need to sort of touch some of the magic. And I thought that in light of the fact that we looked at the BBV documentary last week and how that was very much focusing on the people involved in making the show and sort of how it had affected their career and their lives in retrospect at the time and sort of looking back. Now we see a lot of these productions coming through, which more often than not tend to focus on the likes of us rather than pursuing the stars or the production personnel. It's interesting the way that's flipped in 30 years, because I'm not sure that you could have marketed a documentary like this in the 90s.
No, Dan, shed some more light on this, because I am taken aback slightly because I've not heard of this. So is this a documentary about being a Doctor Who fan, or is this
for the most part? Yeah, I've got the blurb here from the makers. So it's Chris Hansen and Ross Rudiger are the two people behind it. They claim that it celebrates the transformative power of being a Doctor Who fan. It focuses on how the show's themes of the individual's power and the shared experience of fandom have inspired 3 fans on very personal journeys. The film showcases the joy and purpose found through this sci-fi series, despite what may be read online about the fandom. Or I suppose you could say all fandoms have their kind of, well, the nature of being a fan, being fanatic, kind of implies a extreme behavior, doesn't it, David? And everything in moderation, I suppose, is a lesson that we all try to learn. That lesson, something we all perhaps wrestle with at different points in our life. But it does sound interesting.
It sounds wonderful, and excuse me. One of the things that I've got a little theory, okay, and please feel free to shoot me down or agree with it. But I've got a little theory that in fandom at the moment, Doctor Who fandom, of course, has so many different streams. But in fandom, I think there may be a general consensus that is growing, perhaps, that we're not happy with the way that things have gone. Okay, so and I don't. I hate to use this phrase because it's got such a political meaning, but from 10 years ago. But it's all a case of I'll use it anyway. But it's all a case of the fans almost trying to take back control of the direction of the fandom. For example, we've got Philip Roy's wonderful Doctor Who meets Scorpion. We've got Luke and his hooligans. We've got this production. We've got several other productions underway. And it's almost sort of like, well, we're so proud of this, and our love for this is so much that actually we want to control the narrative now. We want more of a say in the narrative. And I think that's really important, because should we have a prolonged hiatus and it become more of a wilderness Mark II? Yes, as Anthony said, we do have the iPlayer, we do have Big Finish, we do have lots of other things that we didn't have initially in 1990. But with the fans saying, do you know what? We want to put out some stuff that is faithful to what it is like to being a Doctor Who fan and faithful to the program in general. It doesn't matter what era, but we want to celebrate our love for what we enjoy.
Well, I think what they've realised, I think what the IP holders have realised through such as YouTube and through the independent market is that there is an audience for kind of like reality TV or fly on the wall style programming, where we see people on our screens who are just like us, literally just like us, who are obsessed with the TV show, and their entire life doesn't revolve around it. It's something that has informed their lives in a largely positive, supportive way. I think that what fandom has come to feel in the intervening decades, and this is why there's less general original drama mounted surrounding Doctor Who, is that we can't commit any kind of IP theft. We've got to observe very carefully boundaries. That I know the people who make dramas, full-length dramas or short fan films, I know that they play by the rules that are set out by the BBC. Any IP holder, but with this, and I think this is why people are resistant to things like the Whoniverse show and their claim that was a show. When the BBC claimed that was a show by fans for fans, no, it's not. They haven't got, with the best will in the world, without sounding sort of adversarial, it's not on them to make films about us. We will make the films about us. We will tell our stories. You tell the Doctor's stories. That's the deal. That has to be, I feel that has to be how it works. And so to see projects like Indoctrinated manifest in the way they have internationally, I think this is the dynamic as it should be. I think it's what you're saying is right, but I think people are dealing with the present situation to some extent, but also the fact that all of Doctor Who can be enjoyed at any given time, Anthony, through iPlayer, through Blu-ray, or whatever. I also think that has changed the nature of the fan experience too. That it doesn't really matter if you think the current Doctor Who's gone to the toilet. It doesn't. It only matters as much as we want to let it matter and contaminate the rest of our lives, because everything else is there, Anthony.
It's a very different wilderness years this time, isn't it? Because because in the 1980s, when Doctor Who finished in '89, Survival, we didn't have those videos. I don't think, the collection wasn't available in its entirety. So there was a thirst for more Doctor Who. We had some videos, but we didn't have all of the videos. So the fact that iPlayer is here to replace that now in this wilderness years is great. But also, we did have, in those later years of the wilderness years, when the fans decided to create their own projects, things like, I don't know if you can remember, like Downtime and Shakedown. They were dramas created by Doctor Who fans for Doctor Who fans. So in many ways, there's some replication here, isn't there? Some aspects very different, but in some aspects the same.
Poor old Sergeant Benton. Sorry, Charlotte. Poor old Sergeant Benton had a huge backstory in one of them, didn't he? I think
there is a pattern starting to, if not repeat itself, then certainly sort of follow a general similar shape. Charlotte, things are going to get interesting over the coming months. I don't doubt. People in the live chat seem quite keen on the idea of this too.
And I think just to add to what David's saying, I think for a long time, when it came to what fans were allowed to speak about Doctor Who and what type of fans the BBC were endorsing, and how they all seemed to be of a certain opinion, they all seemed to have certain viewpoints, and there wasn't a lot of variety, to be blunt. And it wasn't like you'd get that sort of, I think, more genuine fan experience of people having very different opinions. Somebody might love one Doctor and absolutely despise that Doctor. And it was all very corporate and all very controlled. And like I said, you could sort of guess the kind of fans that would get wheeled out. And I think fandom has just got a bit fed up of that now. And they've just gone, do you know what? We're actually a lot more diverse and interesting than the sort of the rhetoric portrays us. And it's like we had that whole thing in the Lux episode, the fans that they had in that bit. And we all sort of just cringed because we were like, God, no. But that's what I mean. There was a certain image of fans.
Yeah.
And I think now that is sort of going to be shaken and changed and sort of be put to a lot more of a truer
I think
lens.
I think it's important, Charlotte, that we acknowledge the fact that, you know, some Doctor Who fans do live very ordinary lives, and they may just get together once a week to watch Doctor Who with their friends, or they may watch it alone. But I think that story sort of gets represented actually quite a lot. I think the truth of the matter is that there's more variety out there, and there's some really interesting stories to be told that could inspire people in all manner of ways. So I'm really keen to see this. We haven't got a release date yet for the film itself. This is the bad part, but you can hear the music over there on where you get your digital music. Dominic Glynn's Indoctrinated original soundtrack is currently available, and again, we're going to keep watching for whenever it may turn up. That 85-minute documentary movie coming soon, somewhere,
amazing,
somehow. But this is Type 40 Live on Rumble, X, YouTube, and on Facebook. More fan talk, of course, when you hit up our playlists for early editions of this show, our Ask Us Anything specials, where it does what it says on the tin. We throw the comment section wide open for people to put whatever question they like to us, whether it's a rant or a rave, a deep dive into a particular story that's been niggling them for a while, or something of the everyday, something of the fan experience, all of that there too. There's our regular shows, such as our recent landmark 250th edition, where we compared Doctor Who, didn't we, to the brand new Netflix movie, The Thursday Murder Club. Now, we had a good time with that and looked at the various news stories that were breaking there and then on both the Big Who and our early edition. And there's our special event shows too. Doctor Who and the Daleks was our latest, a celebration of 60 years of that original Doctor Who film from 1965. That was all with lots of comments and interaction too from people across the various platforms, and lots of clips, lots of stupid jokes and rare pictures. Yeah, it was a real celebration of a seminal piece of not just Doctor Who history, but 60s kitsch cult British cinema. More coming. That
was a really good podcast. That was a really good episode last Thursday. I thoroughly enjoyed it with all that trivia about the movie. It was, if you've not seen it, everybody, you must go and watch it and like it. But yeah, if there are people,
we want them to watch it again. So hit up the playlists for all of that and the podcasts and everything else that we do here at Type 40. The ad break's coming up now. We've always supported unofficial and fan projects here at Type 40. Let's take a look at the latest trailer for Indoctrinated, and we'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. Check this out.
Well, Doctor Who's the reason I'm here today.
It's got these amazing themes of, you know, the lone wanderer doing the right thing even when it's not easy.
I want a hero who shows us what we can be, and the Doctor does that.
It's accepting, like the show itself is just so accepting.
We have this hero, and he does heroic things. He saves people, he fights injustice, he rights wrongs. But they take this hero and they don't give him a gun. They give him a screwdriver to fix things.
We had a hero whose greatest power was his capacity for empathy and compassion.
I found myself relating a lot to the companions. And I looked to these women, and I just saw myself in them. Just basic, everyday, average human trying to do something good in the world. And if they can make an impact, I can make an impact.
Every single piece of film is a ticking time bomb, and it's just a race against time to save it before it's gone forever.
Morgan's Wonderland is the world's first all-accessible, all-inclusive theme park. It ties in so well with the Doctor's philosophy and beliefs. I'm a freelance writer, and since 2013, I've worked on various shows and projects for the park.
It doesn't matter what you're currently doing with your life, you could stop doing that and become something more. Going from watching this TV show when I was a kid to becoming a scientist, it's that thought that you're doing something good in the world.
Who knows what film will inspire the next great filmmaker?
All the little things that divide us are completely irrelevant. All that matters is your character.
Very rarely have run into anybody who's very enthusiastic about Doctor Who that I haven't felt with a good person.
That's what I think makes the show and its fans so special. It's just like nothing in the world.
We're back on Rumble, X, YouTube and Facebook with more Type 40 Live early edition to start off your week across the Whoniverse. Did you enjoy that? What did you think? That was the latest trailer for Indoctrinated. They're the brand new documentary movie coming soon. We hope at some point, as soon as we get a release date for that, we'll let you know. Of course, we're back here with the panel, raring to go for some more, the past, the present and the future of all things Doctor Who. So, yeah, what did you think? What did you think there, Anthony? How was that trailer for you? How did that play?
Well, I could only hear the audio, Dan, because I was making myself another top-up of green tea. But what I could hear sounded great.
Whatever gets you through. Was that the kind of thing you had in your mind, Charlotte, when we looked at the blurb?
Yeah, like I said, it was very clearly fan-centric, and it was nice that they all seemed to be sort of very different types of people, and that's what I think we need to have, showing more of that.
All walks of life. Yeah, I mean, you can only tell so many stories effectively across 80 minutes, and less is more. I think if it was sort of saturated with 10 or 12, it could be a bit too much. I like to think it could be the Doctor Who version of sort of 7 Up or 14 Up, 21 Up and 27 Up. Do you remember the Michael Apted movies that have been playing since the 60s, Anthony? A Doctor Who version of that, I think, could be fun.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, you know, when I always keep taking it back to old classic Doctor Who, and Charlotte must be very bored of me going back to old Doctor Who, but I see the parallels between this wilderness and the old wilderness, if you like, because Doctor Who fans are doing creative things in the space that is left, which is fantastic. It always was, and it always will be the case. So yeah, of course I'll be watching this when it's released. You caught me out, Dan. This has passed me by, but I'm really pleased that I get to know a little bit more about it. It's great.
So wait and watch, and maybe we'll find out a little bit more in time. Maybe it'll play well. That's a terrible segue into this next item, but it's the best I could think of there at short notice. So yeah, we talked a little bit about music earlier on, about Dominic Glynn, in particular, his contribution to Doctor Who, and those old tapes and things that Dwas and the BBC used to put out, and plenty of vinyl as well. It was the way to relive Doctor Who, I suppose, if you hadn't had the foresight to stock up on C60 cassettes and all that kind of thing. All part of the vintage fan experience, and so was using your imagination, I think. I mean, back in the late 70s and early 80s, I became a bit obsessed with just this simple cover to an official BBC Records release, BBC Space Themes from 1979. And the thing that caught my eye, David, and particularly sort of spiked my imagination, was the idea that all the spaceships from my favorite TV shows could possibly be existing in the same space all at once. I was captivated by the sight of the Liberator and the Enterprise there with the TARDIS. Never mind what was on the album. I didn't care about that.
Yeah. Are they the original ones? Because I know Ronnie Hazelhurst did one of Blake 7, which seems really bizarre that Ronnie Hazelhurst covered Blake 7 on one of the BBC things, which is thoroughly amazing. But yeah, they were just amazing, because I know that back in the late 80s, early 90s, they did 2 CDs. BBC released 2 CDs with a lot of sound effects on as well, and radiophonic workshop stuff. One was called Earthshock and the other was called Enlightenment. I don't know if either of anybody on the panel has got them, but I still have those CDs. And they featured obviously music from the late Tom Baker, early Peter Davison era, including the 5 Doctors suite, the Enlightenment suite, the Caves of Androzani, and Resurrection of the Daleks. That was on the second one. But these were absolutely wonderful things to have. because there was some were done at the official releases, and but some were sort of like done by using a Casio keyboard and various different other poor sort of reconstructions. But I know back in the day that the BBC, when there was a new theme tune to Doctor Who, they would release it on 7-inch.
That's right. I've got them all.
Yeah, they would release
got
the
them all.
original one on 7-inch.
But I never did track down this album. I always thought that the lunar module. Well, I always thought that the lunar module on this was a reflection of sort of the sky at night and those sort of real shows as are on the cover there. But we've got a comment here in the live chat from Anthony Parkinson who said that it could be the Moonbase 3 one. It could be any of them, I suppose. But the idea that they could all be there, that's what had got me sort of stimulated, I suppose you could say. And yeah, the list of tracks there is pretty much all your favourites, stretching all the way back to Quatermass. And they've even put on the classic Tomorrow's World theme tune. Anthony, the one with all the bubbling sort of chemicals and hot metal from the mid to late 70s. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, to be fair. I mean, gosh, Doctor Who on vinyl in the 1970s, we were awash, weren't we? Like Genesis of the Dalek soundtrack on vinyl, an original story, Doctor Who and the Pescatons, which I played over and over and over again. Though I think there was a special effects, a Doctor Who special effects album. So if you wanted to relive the robot from the Sontaran experiment beeping, you could sit and play that. I had all of those. I didn't have this. It passed me by. I don't know why. Maybe it was the classical music just a little bit before on side A that maybe turned me off. I don't know. This passed me by. But curiously, when you showed up the track listing there, Doctor Who was last. So always leave the best till last on side 2, I think.
I completely agree. I mean, obviously, merchandise was in thin supply way back in the late 70s. But the TARDIS was only part of what captivated me about this. And I sincerely hope they reissue all of these albums at some point for Record Store Day and all the various other events that they have now. And of course, with the resurgence of vinyl, that would be ideal too. But I never understood as a child, Charlotte, why the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars was missing. And all the other movies and things that I liked, Battlestar Galactica, where was that? Or Buck Rogers' spacecraft. I didn't quite understand there was a difference between the American shows and the British shows, particularly when the Enterprise from Star Trek was there. So yeah, that was a glaring omission for me. I don't think he's very happy about it either. Go on.
So I tell you what, it does show how BBC used to have this sort of real bedrock of either homegrown sci-fi or imported. Like if they could make an album worth of music from all of the shows that they, like I said, either owned or, like Star Trek, it was syndicated. They bought the rights to show it. You couldn't do that now, could you? Like you literally couldn't make that album now.
No way. There'd be too much wrangling, I think is the word, wrangling, and people calling their agents, a bit like him. Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot lately about the relationship between the big three, the rising and falling fortunes of not just Doctor Who, but Star Wars and Star Trek as well. It doesn't really matter what franchises sort of come along in the interim. The things that we think that are going to become massive and change culture forever, somehow it always does fall back to these big three. And I do think that's largely down to the fandoms themselves. I don't see a time where all three of them will ever cross over, sadly, but we do have a development this last week in the story of Star Trek and Doctor Who's crossing over. If you remember, there was Russell T Davies and Alex Kurtzman and their shared Comic-Con panel last summer, where they gave one another the most awkward hug in the world and talked about the possibilities for crossing over, as well as several other things there. We talked about that at the time, and that had come just a few weeks after Doctor Who referenced Star Trek again on screen in the Space Babies episode that started off that series got a lot of people talking, and Star Trek itself is hitting its 60th anniversary this year, just as storied and celebrated as Doctor Who. And multiple generations, I suppose, have come to love each of these characters, these captains, in the same way that we have our doctors. It seemed to finally reach a pinnacle just a few short weeks ago when the TARDIS appeared there in one episode of the current flagship show. This is Strange New Worlds. There was a brief moment there where the TARDIS is trapped with the USS Enterprise inside this sort of star-eating monstrosity of one form or another. And we talked about this at the time, and I did think it was going to end there. But no, it hasn't. If anybody watches Strange New Worlds out there, you've probably noticed this character, Pelia, played by veteran character actress Carol Kane. A very annoying character. I'm not really sure what they were thinking. Maybe they were just happy that they got Carol Kane because she's been around quite a long time, but she was a strange addition to the cast of Strange New Worlds, which is 3 seasons in now. So it turns out, though, what they've done is they have used this character of Pelia, who has a very long lifeline in the same way that Guinan did in Star Trek The Next Generation. And of course, the Time Lords themselves in Doctor Who. The idea is that this character has lived for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And during a scene in the latest episode of Strange New Worlds, I think it was the season finale, around the captain's table, they all get together and have a bit of a chat, during the course of which the character of Pelia says, remind me to tell you about the time I spent with a time-traveling doctor I once knew. I'm not going to try the accent that this character has. And both fandoms have sort of melted down over this over the last couple of days. So had you heard this news, Charlotte, this brand new news about what they're saying is an actual official on-screen crossover? Does this count?
Yeah, I had some people telling me, because I was like you, I was like, oh, it'll just be the TARDIS thing. Like, that's usually the sort of the bare minimum they do when it's crossovers. So when I was like, they've referenced the Doctor? And then then somebody showed me actual dialogue. It's more than a TARDIS, I'll give it that. But it's still, for me, it's just a little bit more, because it's just a bit of dialogue. Like, it's not like a Doctor's been on screen in this series, or even in that comment, I thought they would have at least referenced what Doctor, but the fact that they kept it really vague, I find quite interesting, if I'm being honest. I thought, they'll probably say, a time-traveling Doctor that had a long brown coat, or just a little bit of some clothes or something to sort of zero in on, but they didn't, which did surprise me.
David, what do you think about this? Is this a huge liberty for the makers of Strange New Worlds to be taking here, to offer us a companion we never knew the Doctor had?
No, not at all, I don't think. I think it is very well explained in the Star Trek universe myself, if you wish it to be. Don't forget, Bones travelled in the city at the edge of forever. He time travelled because he went back to the 1960s with Joan Collins. Also, we've got Dr. Crusher, who also time travelled at the end of one of TNG's seasons involving Guinan. When they went back to the 19th century, was it? And I think through the cave thing, that's the one when they found Data's head.
Yes,
had been severed from him. So I think it's very clever, because yes, you can infer that it's a time traveling Doctor, but if she's lived for hundreds of years, who's not to say that she travelled with Dr. McCoy and he told her about that, the fact that he'd time travelled. He'd also time travelled in the 4th Star Trek film. So that there is that also, or it could have been Dr. Crusher. So there are those options open. There is also the option open that she has travelled with the Doctor, so to speak. So it's a very, very open, as Charlotte said, very open-ended sort of statement. So Star Trek fans can go, it's got nothing to do with Doctor Who. Some Doctor Who and Star Trek fans can say, it could have something to Doctor Who, do with Doctor Who, or it could be just Star Trek. Or Doctor Who fans can just go, why the hell are we being mentioned in Star Trek? You know,
I think you're pointing towards what we would call wiggle room.
Yes, I am. There is a lot of whataboutery about that statement. And it's very open-ended and open-ended into a myriad of different possibilities, all of which can all be right and all of which can all be wrong.
There you go. Anthony, you a Star Trek fan at all?
Yeah, I was a fan of the classic series. I've not watched Star Trek. I'm a fan of all the classic things, aren't I? Maybe I'm becoming a classic, an old classic, old fuddy-duddy. I liked all the original classic Star Treks. I watched some Next Generation. I love Doctor Who, but I'm not particularly a science fiction fan. I don't think Doctor Who is particularly science fiction, but apart from possibly a little kind of toe into the worlds of Blake Seven. No, I've not seen any more recent Star Trek. But while David was chatting, he's absolutely right, about worlds colliding and crashing. It reminds me again of the Wilderness Years, which seems to be a thread of tonight's show, either intentionally or not. But the Wilderness Years, when we had a reference to Doctor Who in another program. Do you remember when we were in Nigel's video shop in EastEnders? There was a Cyberman poster in the background for the release of, I guess, Tomb of the Cybermen. So all the fans at that point went, oh my gosh, there's a reference to Doctor Who somewhere in some other program to remind us again about our favourite program. And while you were just chatting, that parallel crossed my mind that, Doctor Who does feature in other programs in Star Trek and in EastEnders, can you believe?
At one time, both Doctor Who and Star Trek were with IDW, publishing brand new comics. That they had a license to make new comics based on both shows, and so they published several spin-offs. They've since parted. Doctor Who has been with Titan now for about 10 years, so they can't do anything about it in comic form for the time being. But I do wonder how people will feel about this, because we already have got a lot of companions. But now that you've explained that, David, I think that people can actually take it as serious or not serious as they're comfortable with. I like it.
Yeah, because don't forget also, it's not the first time we've had the possibility of a crossover with other sort of universes. That originally, for Blake Seven fans, as I know you are one as too, Dan, the Daleks were supposedly meant to be the invading aliens at the end of season B, but that obviously both Terry Nation creatives, but for some reason they decided that a load of Tupperware would invade instead. But yeah, it is very much open, and that's what I like about the fact that it was a very open-ended statement by that character, because it can literally mean there are references for both Star Trek the original series, Next Generation. I'm not sure if Dr. Bashir actually traveled in time in Deep Space Nine, but there are several reference points within the own Star Trek universe, which could mean that actually it's a Star Trek character that she's talking about, or it could mean that it is a Doctor Who character.
And
I'm
also,
impressed, David.
Really?
You said companion. She didn't have to be a companion to travel if it is the Doctor.
Oh, that's true.
Like classic established, I think less, but especially the modern show has established. Sometimes the Doctor will just take somebody on a trip, and that's all it is. He sort of just picks them up. He sort of says, "Oh, do you want to go and see this? I'll show you this," and then he puts them back home. Or they go, "Oh, I've had my fun now, Doctor. I want to go back." So people can sort of. I feel that's what I like a little bit about the loosening sometimes with the modern stuff of the Doctor doesn't, you don't have to be sort of, like I said, have that title of companion as much. It's a bit more open and free flowing, which means she could have just, if it is the Doctor, met him on one night, had a bit of an adventure, and then gone back home.
And buggered off home, yeah. Some people have taken exception to this in the live chat, including DLM, Dalek Lives Matter, Doctor Who and Star Trek exist in completely separate universes. It's an abomination and very poor creativity. With the difference with this is, I don't know if it demonstrates a lack of creativity so much as a lack of restraint and an overindulgence. I think there's an argument to be had there. To me, this has been done very clearly with the best of intentions, regardless of whether it's to our tastes or not. It's not really to my tastes either. Richard says the pocket Star Trek books mention a time-traveling race from Kasterborous that promptly stagnated. That sounds painful. So you expect that kind of thing, I suppose, in tie-in books and even audio dramas, and especially in comics, because a lot of people do tend to sort of indulge there. It's sort of one step removed from fan fiction, I suppose, and there's a lot of indulgence in fan fiction, I feel. But clearly, yeah, this is playing better with some than with others. But then again, it's always been the same, has it? That's always been the case. There was an incident in Enterprise where there was a dimensionally transcendental sort of pod spacecraft thing retrieved and pulled aboard the ship, but no actual connections to Doctor Who were made there. No insinuations of characters or races or situations in the same way. It was just very clear from the language used in that scene that whoever wrote it was probably a Doctor Who fan. Rose Kirby disagrees with the order in which we've got them featured in the big three. It's Doctor Who, Star Trek, and then Star Wars. It depends how it looks. It depends what looks better on the graphic, Rose. That's the truth of the matter. It's poorly aimed at intersectional fans, says the Peter Venkman fans. I'm not even sure what that means, but I'm sure you're right. I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, there's an overabundance, really, now of pop culture in movies and TV and comics and everything else. The geeks have definitely sort of inherited the earth in many ways, haven't they, Anthony? Now everybody declares that they're a geek very loudly, and nobody gets beaten up in the school playground that I'm aware of, certainly.
Yeah, and you know, every one of those images on that picture you've just put up there, Dan, I want to be involved in. You know, I feel as though I want to know all of those stories and all of those adventures. But as I say, you know, lots of science fiction doesn't appeal to me. But I would love to get into Marvel films. But again, there's just so much of it for me, I find quite, you know, overwhelming where to jump on and jump off and what the connections are. And I mean, I loved the latest Superman film because I felt that stood alone. I enjoyed that for what it was and is. Yeah. Great. But to try and jump into something that's already been shown or screened and then be able to build up that picture of Marvel films, I'd love to be able to jump in somewhere in all of those adventures. But I feel as though as the universes for each of those things grow, I feel a little bit more left out. I'm with the Star Wars. I'm still with Star Wars and Disney. I'm still keeping up with those. But everything else, like Star Trek and Marvel, the world has just kind of slipped away from me. And Harry Potter, to an extent, I was at the wrong age for Harry Potter. I have seen all of the films, but again, it just slips away because I know they're making a new series of Harry Potter. All of that, I should be involved in it. I should really enjoy it, but yeah, I just feel as though those universes have got just a bit too big for me, and I don't know where to quite jump in.
Feel like you've missed your window. A Dalek Lives Matter here says money. It questions money is the best of intentions. Well, how much money are they going to make out of 2 lines in an episode of a season of TV that people have already decided whether they're going to be committed to watching or not? There's no external project that's been commissioned to exploit that in any way. It's just there to amuse the people who are in the know. That's my feeling of it. I mean, in my opinion, the Doctor Who universe has already said 2 or 3 times, not least of all in Space Babies, that Star Trek within the Doctor Who universe is a fictional thing. Rose said to the 9th Doctor, "Can you give me a bit more Spock?" All the way back in the Anti-Child, Charlotte. And to me, that sort of closes it off there. But what I've come to think is that just because Star Trek is a fictional thing in the Doctor Who universe, it doesn't mean that Doctor Who is a fictional thing in the Star Trek universe. It doesn't necessarily work both ways, I suppose. And if it entertains some people, then it's absolutely fine. And just as David says, I don't suppose they have boxed us in. I'm very impressed with the sort of the workaround there that you've come up with, David.
Thank you.
But I'm looking at what you've just said, Anthony. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because of that sort of gap in all our viewing schedules that an absence of Doctor Who is going to create. We all love going back to the old stuff, of course, but Doctor Who is something that's always reflected the times, apart from the wilderness years again, that we like to move with the times, and then we revisit sort of in context after the fact. It isn't nice when it goes away or is on pause or is stalled in any way, because the wind kind of gets taken out of one's sails a little. And nothing is ever going to replace Doctor Who in any of our affections, and yours probably either. But what do we find to fill that gap? I mean, more often than not, it's going to be one of the big three. I think that's most likely. You usually find Doctor Who fans are into one or two or both of these at any given time, have been at some phases of their existence. But I was really curious about the crossover between Doctor Who and the other big three members. So I went over onto X and launched a poll a couple of weeks ago to just gauge a little as to what the crossover actually could be. We've got the results here. I'm happy to say. There's a limited amount of options that you can create at any given time. And also, I didn't want to spread it too thinly because I think it was important to keep it to those brands, particularly on a major platform, the idea that other people can share the poll to get more of a response over on X. So I started with the big three, with Star Wars, Doctor Who, and Star Trek, but expanded it out a little to incorporate what I thought could be two reasonable parallels for one reason or another. Both of them are very British. Both of them originally hail from literature, and each of them now have been around for several decades, some more than others. So I included 007 James Bond, the movie series, the books, however you want to define that IP, and funnily enough, there, Anthony, Harry Potter as well, because I feel that between them, they sort of serve similar functions for different generations, and Doctor Who has that kind of big crossover appeal, cross-generational appeal. So I went and asked people specifically, following on from a conversation we'd had previously, which of these four other geeky IPs do you count yourself a fan of? These were the ones that we suspected could have the biggest likely crossover with our show, Doctor Who. And I was really quite surprised when I got the results back. It wasn't what I was expecting, because obviously there's been a fierce rivalry, I think, between Doctor Who fans and Star Trek and Star Wars fans. So when it came back that most, like 50% of responding Doctor Who fans count themselves also as fans of Star Trek, I was very surprised. Star Wars and James Bond tie there for second place with 18.5% of the vote, and Harry Potter, the newest of the other four, trailing behind with 13%. That really did surprise me. I sort of expected the way that Star Wars has been tainted in recent years, Charlotte, and the endurance of Harry Potter, the adaptations of it that still continue. I thought that Harry Potter may have bested Star Wars. But yet, Charlotte, what do you think of these results? Would these have been what you'd have expected?
I would have expected Potter to be last, and this is coming from somebody who, I grew up with Harry Potter. I was the generation that had the books, that watched the movies, and it still has got a very close place in my heart. But I think Potter is pure fantasy. It's pure sort of make-believe, and it's more centric with the children to that story. And I think those things, whereas they can be in Doctor Who, I think they're not as prevalent. So the people who love Doctor Who are not going to go for the stuff in Harry Potter. The Bond one, I'm surprised it got 18. That's the one that surprised me, if I'm being honest. Because I can't myself see a lot of crossover between the Bond character or the Bond movies with Doctor Who. Because it's a lot more pure sort of espionage and spy and sort of a one-man sort of band sort of feel. Whereas Doctor Who's always about teams, I feel like, with the Doctor and the companion. And Bond he can be a bit more like grey at points, and the Doctor's usually a very moral character. But I think what this shows, to be honest, is even though we all have different tastes and we all have different things we like, even in all those brands, there's clearly some traits and some story beats or something that we can all find enjoyment in, even though the outward image is very different. And I think that just shows the power of stories and characters and how we can connect and what we get from it. I think that shows that brilliantly, actually. The sort of the different ones you picked in the fall.
Earlier on, I mentioned about the fact that Doctor Who and the various different phases of it kind of is a reflection of the times that each generation of kids grows up with. And I think the same could be said of Star Trek. We looked at all those different Star Trek captains, and I think in many respects James Bond is similar. I think the different actors that have played it and the creative chapters of its existence, they kind of run parallel to Doctor Who's in many respects. That's why I always associate them quite closely, despite the fact that they are, as characters, so drastically different. I've always found there to be a massive crossover between Doctor Who fans and James Bond fans. So I was expecting a higher quota of Bond fans. I have to admit. What are your thoughts, Anthony? I mean, are these results, they surprise you in any way?
They don't surprise me, I have to say. But I'm probably with you, Dan, more thinking that James Bond would have come quite close to Doctor Who, because it feels like, an ongoing, well, they're all ongoing franchise, but it feels like, a lead central character, various assistants, along the way. It feels more like Doctor Who, perhaps. I was reading, as you were all chatting, I was reading some of the comments in the chat. And actually, I wonder whether, and people are talking about Space 1999 and talking about American television series like Buffy, are they closer to Doctor Who? But I think if you'd asked me to make the choices, Dan, the choices that you've made are great. But if you had asked me about the choices, I probably would have gone for things like Doctor Who, Adam Adamant Lives, which is kind of like an early forerunner, produced by Verity Lambert, written by Dennis Spooner, but an early forerunner of John Pertwee and an assistant. The Avengers feels very much like Doctor Who and an assistant, a sidekick. I wonder how those older television programs from the...
I think it's a different question. I think that what we're looking at there, they're not IPs or brands, they're specific productions offered anchored to a particular time, whether they ran for 2 seasons or 6 or 7 like the Avengers, or something like Stargate, which was on for the best part of 10 years. They are still very, very isolated things, whereas the James Bond, Harry Potter, they are broader brands in a comparison to the Marvel and DC, I suppose, which we now have. And so that's why I particularly looked at those, because it's specifically the intellectual properties which attracted me to this. I think that's why the big three are the big three. I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with the genetic makeup of each show stroke film. I think it's down to a cultural significance, the ability for each of them to continue to roll with changes in fashion, changes in technology and style and tastes, David. I think that's the difference between an intellectual property and simply something that bobs up and it's popular for a few years. So you know, Blake Seven, Buffy, all the stuff that I absolutely adore. It's simply not in. It's not in the same league as Harry Potter, which has only been around for nearly 30 years. Never mind something as storied as Star Trek. Do you see the distinction I'm making?
Yeah, I do. And Harry Potter is a world within a world. It's a world within what would happen if there was a secret wizarding world within the world we live in today. And it's its own distinct universe. In as Charlotte explained, it's pure fantasy. And although it's brilliantly plotted, I've never discovered a plot hole in Harry Potter, no matter how hard I've looked, and I have looked. What Anthony says about James Bond is correct. Don't forget, John Pertwee was sort of self-styled himself as the James Bond sort of doctor with the action hero. So the results don't really surprise me. I would have expected, as Charlotte and Anthony said, James Bond to be a little bit higher. But because don't forget, you've also got the baddies such as Jaws and of course, the head of Spectre himself with his white cat, Blofeld, stroking as a sort of master-like figure. But Star Trek, I am absolutely not surprised at all, because there are, although we've talked about Star Trek previously on the show tonight, Star Trek has got a number of similarities with Doctor Who in the way that, like for examples, with villains such as Trelawney, Q. The Borg being I personally think an obvious homage to the Cybermen. So there are very sort of similar sort of threads there.
But most of those things have bred a certain amount of resentment, I think, between the two brands.
Yeah.
We've had to overcome. It's something that I've noticed as well, David, that initially I was surprised to find Harry Potter so low. But with hindsight, listening to what you guys have said, and after processing a little more, I do wonder, maybe Harry Potter is not registering as much broad interest. Do you think it could be because the Harry Potter story is finite? You know, J.K. Rowling wrote those, is it 7 books? And I know there's a couple of like extraneous things, but that's it. And there's the stage play, but largely speaking, it is those 7 books. There was always going to be just 7, story told. And so there's fewer places for it to go. There's not much room to accommodate extraneous material. I would imagine there's pockets that would be ideal for sort of fan fiction and things like that, and there certainly would be for something such as slash fiction. But it's not like with Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who, where they've said the idea is as a brand, it could flow anywhere. It's a galaxy far, far away. It's how romantic that is, and there's talk of generations before and generations to come. In Star Trek, you've got different quadrants. You've got the idea is that the universe is impossibly big for us to travel in our short lifetimes. That's built into that. And then there's Doctor Who that can go anywhere and any when. So Harry Potter being so limited, that could be a distinctive flaw.
You are absolutely spot on with your analysis, and it is a brilliant analysis, because the last few words in the last Harry Potter book, I believe, Charlotte, please correct me if I'm wrong, were "and all was well."
Yes.
So that is a definite ending. That is a definite ending. End, bang, gone. Star Trek, you can travel infinitely into space. Star Wars, the same. You're always going to have the issues between the Empire and the Jedi. James Bond, you're always going to have baddies to fight. So it's those 3 are open-ended, and as you quite brilliantly said, Harry Potter is finite. You've got your wizarding world. She's gone a little bit back further into history with obviously Fantastic Beasts, but it still ends, if you ignore the cursed child, it still ends with that sentence, "and all was well." And that's bang, shut, gone.
Yeah, I think what it is as well with Harry Potter, you've got a chosen one arc, you've got a prophecy arc, but it's so central to Harry. It can only be Harry because of, if you know the story about the date he was born and his parents, because whereas you could say, well, Luke's a chosen one, but actually it was more Luke's story was about a bigger picture. He was a chosen one, but like David said, it was about the Jedi and the Sith. It was about the good and the bad parts of the Force. He was a part of that story and he was very important, but there was lots of other things around him. Whereas with Harry Potter, it all centered on him. And I think that's why it has struggled when they have gone out of that sort of circle of characters, like the Fantastic Beasts stuff. The first movie worked because they didn't try and go big. They kept it really small with Newt. And then as soon as with that second movie, they were like, oh, let's bring in like another wizarding war and another major bad guy. It was like, well, no, we've already done this. Like, it worked the first one because you didn't have that stuff and it was refreshing. But with Potter, we've had this. Like I said, we've had that story. So I think some things live on because they've got such a depth of a world to explore with really good characters that when you leave those characters, there's other ones that can pick up the baton. Like with Bond. Like, you can have a different actor in the role, or you can have a new villain. But with Potter, you can't do that. And honestly, I think...
David?
Yeah, and Charlotte's absolutely bang on there. Bang on with the Wizarding World thing. Because to build on her point, the Wizarding Wars that you had between Dumbledore and Grindelwald was already told, spoken about in the last Harry Potter book.
Yes.
So all she has done is essentially expanded on that and then made it into a film. So that story already existed within the Potter books. So she hasn't really expanded on the Potter universe because Newt also appeared in the Potter books.
Yeah,
because
he was referenced.
Yes, he was. So yet that firmly backs up your analysis that Potter was a very closed world to start, a very finite start to a very finite story to start with. She's just made a little bit more money out of it by just explaining what happened.
Yeah, everybody who responded to that poll, obviously, thank you so much for just taking a few seconds to mull that over. I didn't vote at all. I kid myself that I'm not a major Star Trek fan, and then I look across my bookcases, Anthony, and I notice how I've got everything, sometimes twice, on Blu-ray, DVD, various things, just like Doctor Who. So I actually do probably fall into that bracket, that 50%. So quite why I'm so surprised, heaven only knows. But it did surprise me getting that back, because there was that kind of mock competitive sort of relationship between Star Trek and Doctor Who fans, wasn't there, for a number of years in the 80s and the 90s particularly.
Yeah, agreed. I've just, it's a trip down memory lane for me, Dan, because I'm just reading the comments and people are talking about all kinds of television programs from yesteryear and films from yesteryear. A for Andromeda, Quatermass. You know, when I first became a Doctor Who fan and started to go to Doctor Who events, there was always that telefantasy group of fans that I easily, fell into, that, as I've already said about Avengers and Adam, and there was television programs from yesteryear, spy thrillers, science fiction, all of those things that we've talked about this evening. But like Charlotte said, it would be very difficult, wouldn't it, now to make a BBC Records album of science fiction shows from today. The 60s and 70s is very rich for telefantasy and science fiction on the BBC and ITV, which we don't have anymore. I think the nearest we came to a kind of telefantasy program in the 90s was something called Virtual Murder, where John Pertwee and various other actors came and did a guest spot on this television program. And it was the closest you had to a modern Avengers and modern telefantasy. Do you remember it, Dan? Do you remember it at all?
Don't get me started. Nicholas Clay starred in that show. I love Virtual Murder. Never had an official release. Now and again, I corner people and talk to them about the show, talk at them about it. They never have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. So, yes, it was a wonderful series.
Yeah. The John Pertwee episode is called A Torch for Silverado. And he's an arsonist, and he wants to go and blow up and burn down pornography shops in London. What more could you wish for in a television show?
It's really wonderful.
It is wonderful. It is really wonderful. And nobody said it in the comments, so I felt, Dan, it was my moral duty to talk about Virtual Murder.
There could be ground in expanding the poll on one platform or another, and to get people to sort of register their interest in which of their other favourite shows, which do they think have just literal shows, whether they're ran for 2 years or 10, 12 seasons, and let us know which are your favourites. That's another question. But obviously there's some great shows past and present. Mate, you forgot Stargate and Buffy. I forgot nothing, Cliff Maxwell. Do you honestly think I forgot those? But no, it's a very specific question I wanted to ask in this respect. Lots of name checks for stuff like Space 1999, which has just marked its own 50th anniversary. I count myself as a Star Trek fan of the original series and the Next Generation, says Woodhouse122. Not too bothered about any of the Kurtzman shows. You're missing nothing. You're missing nothing. And Philip Roy is in the live chat too, Doctor Who himself, and reminds us that Doctor No, the book, features Bond grappling with a giant squid. That's clearly a Power of Kroll crossover. Yes, you heard it here first. I didn't know that. Who doesn't like Star Wars? Proclaims Domgo. The classic trilogy, of course. See, limits right the way down. We've all got our limits. And people remarking that John Pertwee liked to think of himself as the James Bond of Doctor Who. Or people complaining about various different Bonds, various different stories, various different Star Treks. Knock yourselves out, everybody. David Mullins says you can have a Doctor Who crossover with any of these, but Star Trek could never cross over with Star Wars, for example. The Doctor Who premise is built for crossovers to occur. I suppose because there's an established land of fiction in the Mind Robber. That's a bit of a get out as well. If we wanted to use it, Anthony, there's little pockets in Doctor Who, which again you could say that probably would be lazy, just as DLM says. But it's harmless. I feel it's harmless myself.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, I've got to stop looking at these comments because the comments are taking me down yesteryear. I've lost it. Rob Alexander. Was it Rob Alexander? Somebody. Anyway, talking about Man from U.N.C.L.E. And now we're going down a whole different channel of, retro telefantasy, Man from U.N.C.L.E. The Persuaders. It just keeps on giving, doesn't it? I'm sorry, I'm lost in the chat.
Quatermass, of course, predating Doctor Who, and experiencing somewhat of a resurgence lately. I feel, David, a resurgence of interest due to sort of remastered releases and new books. A friend of the show, Toby Haydock, for example, has just put out a new book, and so I think that sometimes these things again kind of bubble up when there's anniversaries in the same way that Doctor Who does. But obviously, there's far less material, so it can't be exploited anywhere near the same way. Yeah. And that again is why I felt that Harry Potter and Bond were the two most prominent ones. But in the last 10 or 15 years, I've had people suggesting, Kyle on the podcast, he says, "Oh, the Fast and the Furious should be in there, the Bourne movies should be in there," and both of those, they kind of had their periods of popularity and have now gradually subsided, and that kind of proves my point. And I feel the same way. The same thing has sort of happened with the MCU as well. The comics universe, to both Marvel and DC, exist in their thing, in their medium that they call their home in print. I think that's different. But the film incarnations, again, I feel they could have had their time in the sun as well, particularly Marvel. And so the big three, to me, still stands very proudly the big three. But we'll keep pushing out the boundaries, I think, where we can. I just wanted to find out what people were going to dive back into while they sort of nurse wounds after the last few months of revelations, I suppose, and various quotes that tell us something but nothing about our favourite show.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's you've got to find. I'm so sorry about my voice. It's still a little bit.
You're still
tricky,
suffering,
but,
aren't you?
yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and franchises will come and go, as Anthony is saying whilst he's getting lost in the chat, talking about those wonderful series. We could talk about The Professionals, The Sweeney. We could talk about Mission Impossible. We could talk about all different sort of franchises like that. But as you quite rightly said, we could, as you mentioned, Blade 7 and various other things, Bread Dwarf. I think is another one of those franchises that sort of like could be viewed as a sort of like a subsidiary of the big three. But as far as the test of time goes, Doctor Who, Star Wars, and Star Trek. Obviously, Doctor Who and Star Trek are the longest. Star Trek nearly approaching 60 years next year. Doctor Who over 60 years. Star Trek approaching 50 years. That's a hell of a long time to keep going and consistently keep going. James Bond, obviously the oldest of a sort of franchise as well. And I think that other, as you quite rightly said, other franchises will come and go. They might have come from print. They might have come from somewhere else as well. But the big three, I think, are still the big three and will continue to be the big three for as long as we keep talking about them. Because, as we've said, there is an infinite amount of possibilities that you can go with them. There are infinite amount of places that you can go because the Force is good and bad side of the Force, the dark side, the light side. So the Force is that sort of perennial, infinite quest as to what side you might fall on. Star Trek, there's an infinite amount of space that you can travel in. Doctor Who, you can go anywhere in time and space. So it's like an open book. The MCU, there are only certain places you can go with the MCU, and they have gone there time after time after time and kicked the arse out of it to the point where if you jump on at the wrong point, you can be absolutely lost. But the other three, the big three, you can go anywhere with them at any time, and you can jump on or jump off at any point. And that is the beauty of them. And I think that's why they are so sustainable and have lasted that length of time.
Thank you to everybody who's contributed to our poll on this. There will be further inquiries, I think, as time moves on, as our viewing time gets divided up amongst the other things that we love, I don't doubt. We can't only read or watch or listen to Doctor Who, can we? I'm sure some people out there are going, yes, of course, only Doctor Who will do. If you want to catch the latest season of Strange New Worlds, that's still streaming on Paramount Plus. There, catch up on the Doctor Who sort of crossovers there between our universe and theirs. We're reliably informed, of course, that James Bond will return on Amazon at Amazon Studios in the next few years under new director and creative force Denis Villeneuve. A new lead actor is due to be announced soon-ish. We kind of hope. Stay tuned, obviously, for that. And our very own Matt Smith has been confirmed now as one of the lead actors of the upcoming Star Wars 50th anniversary movie, Star Wars Starfighter. That's in cinemas from 2027. Can't wait to see what happens there. Again, let us know what you think of our poll, of the big three, of the big-ish five, and what would your big five be? Let us know there in the comments, and we'll get back to you. Of course we will. Of course we will.
Ah, perfect. Just the person I need to see. Firstly, loving the outfit, by the way. Really suits your hair. Secondly, the universe is falling apart. I don't have much time to yet. I need to shoot off. I need to do something, but by all means, this is imperative. Watch Type 40. The Type 40 podcast is where you need to be. Seguida!
Always where you need to be. Yes, and as if to bring us back to Earth with a bump, come and say hello to us as always on our social media, Instagram and X at Type 40 Doctor Who, or steam into the Type 40 Facebook group as well. And tell us what would make your big 3 or big 5. You can start a few arguments about all of that, I don't doubt, as well as the various other topics that we've covered on this edition and other recent Type 40 live streams and podcasts and everything else. You can get involved with the show too through the wonder of SpeakPipe. Send us a review, a suggestion, a reaction, a rant or a rave over there on SpeakPipe. And we can bring them into the show, either the live stream or the podcast. You can get involved in a virtual way over there. We talk Doctor Who here at Type 40 Live and the Type 40 podcast throughout the generations. Here with you in the live chat on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X. Thank you for another roaring conversation, everybody. These are going to be trying times, I feel, for Doctor Who fans. We'll probably hear something sooner than we think, but until then, it's a genuine question. How will we fill up that viewing schedule? If the worst comes to the worst, I suppose there's always more from us here at YouTube, is the shot.
Cope with us and our antics, yeah.
Antics, David. Antics.
I love antics.
What a great word, antics. Yeah, thank you for joining us again, for battling through despite your somewhat poorly throat. I feel you need to get a hot drink down you, at the very least.
Absolutely, I'll put some honey and lemon in it.
Anthony Weiner, good to have you back as always. So another blast down memory lane with not too many diversions into the current state of things.
I always say to you, Dan, when I say, "Oh, do you want me this Monday? What are we talking about?" And I always say, "You're not talking about too much news stuff, are you?" So that was a really nice balance. So thank you. I felt part of the conversation. As I say, I was enjoying looking at the chat around those old vintage programs that I'd forgotten about. So that was good fun.
Good stuff. Looking forward to hearing more from you next time. And yeah, the comments are still coming. And people still trading who are their favourite other TV shows, other franchises, Charlotte. Miss Marple versus Jason. That's the spin-off.
That would be interesting.
The universe crossover no one asked for. Leave your imaginations to sort of play with that one, I suppose. But that wraps up another early edition of Type 40 Live. We're going to run around here on the walkways and the ramps, in and out of these various cubby holes between now and the next edition of Type 40 Live. Another Big Who coming up in just a couple of days' time. More news, views, nostalgia, banter from across the Whoniverse, where we always have the time. If you have the space, we'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.